do whatever it can and try to diplomatically and financially squeeze the regime. So it will have to choose basically between survival and keeping nuclear weapons. That's why we have maximum sanctions in place. And we talked a little bit about, a lot of people think sanctions have been in place for a very long time. They have, but not serious sanctions. Serious sanctions have only been in place on North Korea since about February, March of last year. But sanctions have never been really implemented because China, which I'll get to, never really implemented sanctions. China is finally doing more just in recent months, and we can talk about why, and because Mr. Trump is really squeezing China very, very hard on this. So China is finally doing more, but that's only been a few months. And if you look at the case of Iran, it took 3 years of very serious sanctions for Iran to come to the negotiating table. So it takes some time for that to play out. That's where the Trump administration is in terms of trying to pressure through sanctions. So where is China on this? Problem with China is that it's not that China wants nuclear North Korea, but China's priority has always been trying to avoid instability of the Korean Peninsula. China's priority has been trying to still keep North Korea as a buffer state, to keep unified Korea, does not want unified Korea. That's pro-United States, right? Why would China want unified Korea that's potentially pro-United States and has all these U.S. forces in there? Like they don't want that. They want a buffer. They don't want instability. So what South Koreans have been doing under the previous administration, Park Geun-hye, is when they've been trying to work with China to make China's interests say, look, your interest is not served by this. Your interest will be better served by doing something about North Korea. Because China, right now, 90% of North Korea's trade is with China. China supplies everything to North Korea: fuel, food, everything, consumer goods. So if China really cut everything off, North Korea will be in trouble. So that's why everybody's getting to China. But again, China does not see it's in its interest to really rein in North Korea to the point that North Korea will collapse. That's why South Koreans have been trying to make that argument. Look, China is South Korea's #1 trading partner, not United States. China and South Korea trade volume is double that of South Korea, United States, South Korea, Japan combined. Hey, China, we already close. We already have this economic relationship. And all the stuff that you don't like THAAD, missile defense, we're there, you don't want that, that's because of North Korea. If you cannot get a handle on it, maybe there is a proliferation in Northeast Asia. South Korea might have to go nuclear. Japan might have to go nuclear. Potentially Taiwan will follow, because Taiwan does not want to be the only country left. Is this a great picture for you, China? But so far, China has not philosophically completely shifted its thinking. That's why it's continuing, the administration is continually pressing on China to do more. So that is the policy. Diplomatically isolate North Korea, financially isolate North Korea to the point where North Koreans will have to come back. But for that to really work, China has to do its part. But as I said, I'm sort of also skeptical whether China will get there. And I was just talking to the White House official who said, they're willing to then play really hardball with China if China is not going to get there. So we'll see what's going to happen. But I do think we are at a critical point here. We're at a very critical point. Because North Korea is done with about 90 to 95% of they've completed there. They're very few steps away. We talked about, they really reached the new milestone when they tested their first intercontinental ballistic missile in July, 4th of July this year. They tested 2, and then they just recently tested 1. The last one really showed the range they could hit anywhere in the United States. The question about their technical capability, there's some question about miniaturization, but I think it's pretty much, there is a consensus that North Korea have miniaturized. What that means is, as we're talking about, there may be really one technical hurdle away, which is re-entry capability, having a successful re-entry capability. So they're going there. Kim Jong-un is not stopping. Despite this recent thaw, I think he's going to continue. He will have to continue and show that he has this re-entry capability, which will probably come maybe spring of this year. And then the U.S. decide at that point, what are we going to do? if sanctions and China playing this maximum pressure through sanctions and trying to get China to do more does not work, and North Korea, let's say, test another nuclear weapons test, but like atmospheric test over the Pacific Ocean, like it threatened to do. What are we going to do? Are we going to live with nuclear North Korea, with all the potential dangers that I talked about it earlier in my remarks, and say deterrence and containment? That's the only option, because we do not want potentially catastrophic war on the Korean Peninsula. Or is our concern for nuclear proliferation, concern for being nuclear blackmail in the future, all of that too great that we must take preventive action now, even if that means we might have to hit North Korea first. What that really means is maybe a cruise missile strike on a missile or nuclear facility, and then take a risk. And even the consequences of that, there is some debate on what would Kim Jong-un do? How would he respond? Some folks make an argument that because Kim Jong-un is ultimately rational and wants to survive, that he would not respond fully. He would not turn Seoul into CO5, even after he gets bloody nose, right? That's an assumption, but some people are making that argument, particularly if you make it very clear that this is going to be a limited strike like Syria, to get rid of this, but we're not intending to destroy the country. We're not intending to do a whole regime change. What would Kim Jong-un do? But that's an assumption. And I will tell you, and other folks say, well, Kim Jong-un cannot just afford to sit there just domestically, because his whole legitimacy is based on standing up to the United States, standing up to Trump, having this. How is he going to survive if he just sits there and take it? Very, very difficult question. Because in terms of understanding North Korea, and I worked at CIA with all available intelligence to me, I'll tell you something that we do not have a good handle on, is regime intentions. There's capabilities, intentions, and even resolve, right? And we have some understanding of the capabilities, not perfect, there's still disagreement on exactly what North Korea is. And then intentions, we do have some understanding of some intentions, although we still not, but resolve, what kind of resolve does Kim Jong-un have? We do not know that. And I'll just admit something very embarrassing to you. When Kim Jong-un first came into power, we did not have a lot of information about this guy. We really used a picture of, it's the same 11, 12-year-old picture the New York Times was running and what. That's the photo that we had. It was really pathetic how little information we had on him. We had some recollections of this guy's, Kim Jong-un's former sushi chef, Japanese guy who gives some anecdotal thing about Kim Jong-un, and we're trying to piece together what kind of leader he is. But we lack, North Korea is a hard target for a reason. We call in the intelligence community North Korea as a hard target, and there's good reason for that. I mean, some of you guys understand intelligence. It's because we cannot run good human intelligence, right? How do you run spies in North Korea? We can't send in spies in North Korea. North Koreans themselves can even travel domestically without a permit. They cannot go from one city to another without a permit. Nobody even has a passport. How do you even run in there with the surveillance and security service and everybody checking up on each other? It's impossible to run a good human intelligence. There's a whole host of reasons why we lack good intelligence. But so my ultimate point is, we don't know how Kim Jong-un will really react to a strike. So these are unfortunate lessons, and I'm sorry to ruin your lunch or give you a piece of, not give you more of a positive news. But I do think 2018 is going to be a pivotal year for us, and this is truly the number one crisis that the United States is facing right now.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you would, standard Tiger Bay practice, if you have a question for Dr. Terry, please write it down on paper and submit it to the head table. And we have a few questions already, but if you don't mind, Dr. Terry, if you would. First, how stable is Kim Jong-un's regime and his hold on leadership at this time?
That's a great question. And I happen to be a stability analyst for a while, so that's obviously being debated, but it doesn't look good. So to analyze the stability situation in North Korea, we look at what you say. Well, first, how was North Korea able to survive this many years when every other dictator falls apart? What's the deal with this Kim family, right? Poor country, how do they survive? When we say there's a pillars of stability that kept the regime going, right? And one of them is elite support. As long as elite support the regime, it continues. During the famine years, millions of people died. It doesn't matter. As long as elites are loyal, elites support the regime, they survive. Secondly, security apparatus, right? They have a pervasive, just interworking layers of security apparatus that really keep tight control of the population. Third is ideological indoctrination and monopoly on information. Total indoctrination of the whole country, complete monopoly on information, so they don't know any better, so they keep people from having any kind of uprising. And the fourth is foreign assistance. They used to get a lot of money from China, Russia, South Korea even gave them a lot of money, even sunshine years for 8 years, they gave 10 years, they gave $8 billion. So when you look at those pillars of stability now, North Korea is in trouble. First, elite support. Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea, really enjoyed elite support because he was an elite loyalty. Kim Il-sung, the founding father. Because he was a bona fide leader. He fought the Japanese, he was a guerrilla fighter. He had some real story there. And people were loyal to him. Less so under Kim Jong-un years, but they were still supporting him because their fate was tied to Kim Jong-il. Now, of course, under Kim Jong-un, people act like they're supporting him. But there are key defectors who defected to South Korea. One is Tae Yong-ho, the former deputy ambassador to UK, who was a very eloquent defender of the regime, defected. And there was another guy who was a money man for Kim Jong-un. He defected. He's now living in Northern Virginia. And according to these guys, elites are very disgruntled, but they can't dare to speak up. When they saw how Kim Jong-un killed Chang Song-taek, his uncle, the second most powerful man in North Korea, year after he came into power, not just purging him or just killing, people used to get purged. All these people would have mysterious car accidents, and I would say, oh my God, for a country that has so little cars, there's so many car accidents. But the way they dragged this guy out, Chang Song-taek, killed him with an anti-aircraft gun in front of hundreds of people, and then hundreds of his associates and family and children. Elites were shocked. They were like, what is going on with this guy? So it's diminished. They are scared, right? Just look at how many purges that Kim Jong-un has gone through. I lost count on because I think there was 100 defense ministers now, like in 6.5 years power. He's getting rid of anybody who's speaking up, or now who's dared to even, the one guy he killed because he fell asleep while he was giving a speech. So elite support is what those defectors are saying, they're just coward, they're scared, but it's not there. Then if something happens, there is a trigger. You cannot really rely on it as before. And the foreign assistance is now down to just China, and even now China, we're pressing China to do less of that. Ideological indoctrination, that's going down too, because this monopoly on information, the North Korean regime cannot control information now that's coming into North Korea from China. Or a lot of South Korean DVDs, soap operas, and movies, and K-pop are going into North Korea. They cannot stop it. They're so popular in North Korea. North Koreans are willing to risk their lives watching these things. I don't know if anybody has seen South Korean soap opera, but they're very, very addictive. So I'll tell you, even monopoly on information, that's eroding. Ideological indoctrination, that's eroding. Pervasive security apparatus, everybody's on the hook. They're all corrupt because they're just all trying to survive, so they can be bribed. There's military indiscipline and so on. So to ultimately answer your question, we don't know, of course, when Kim Jong-un would fall. And we used to always describe the regime as it's like a coma patient. You're like lying there. You can go there another 20, 30 years. But as Arab Spring and other international incidents have shown, you don't know what that spark is going to be, what will ultimately take. But though I think stability situation is less stable than at any time in history of North Korea.
Mr. Posey, what role will internet warfare play in the multidimensional battlefield directed against North Korea?
Internet warfare?
Yes, ma'am. Or cyberspace warfare, I guess.
Oh, is it a cyber question or internet question? Okay. Well, cyber is huge. North Korea, so let me address cyber part. North Koreans now are focused on asymmetric capability. So it's not only nuclear. I just happen to talk about nuclear missile, but they're going on. There is biological, there's chemical, and then there's cyber. And they are training. They are really focused on it, a high priority. They're plucking out kids who they think they should be smart kids from elementary school and just training them to be cyber warriors. Now there's an actual unit. They're just focused on training the cyber warriors. So I think that's going to be huge in the future, for North Korea, and they're already, there are so many, not only Sony hacking, but with the Bangladesh bank, they're trying to steal money. There's all these incidents. Now they're more financially squeezed. I think we're going to see more and more incidents where they're trying to steal money. They're going cybercrime is going to go up because they're cornered and they're spending a lot of energy and money to their cyber program. We are too. But we understand this, US government understands this. And we have our own cyber thing. And you remember all these missiles that did fail? And some people were trying to link it. Does it have to do with our cyber capability? It's hard to tell because we are trying to do that. And then they fall, but no one can really link whether this caused this. But both US and North Korea, and this is something that we really have to watch out for. Just a little the internet information warfare. I wanted to focus on information warfare, just using that as an example. Because already information is slowly getting into North Korea, but North Korea does not have, they cannot mobilize. There's no social media, there's no internet, there's no Facebook, there's no Twitter, there's not anything that normal people can have access to. So it's really impossible for the public to get mobilized. I think it's so important for us to be focused on information warfare. We should focus on trying to get information into North Korea to both have targeted message to the elites and to the public. Elites, because of this elite support, we can target the messages by saying, A, the path that your leader is on is going to lead to your and your children's self-destruction and ruin. Second, if you were to defect to South Korea and leave, you will have an alternate life that's available for you, maybe an immunity or something. So you need to get information to the elites as well. Because ultimately, I do think the North Koreans, it'll be good if North Koreans can bring about the change in North Korea. So he was tortured, but there is some folks who have said that he has done things. Otto did also that was very offensive to the regime that had to do with the poster. It went a little beyond stealing. He did something to the poster that enraged the regime officials. So I think they didn't think he was going to die. That's why they were holding on to him for so long. But once they realized that he was going to, they wanted to get him out. So it's really, really tragic. And I'm just against anybody who's trying to send their young folks to North Korea. It's just not, there's other, I'm an adventurous traveler too. Just, this is not a place, but I think it's just a little bit complicated in terms of Otto's story. But there's no doubt that he was tortured.
Why should China do anything to eliminate the North Korean nuclear program? Because that would limit China's own leverage. Or because with that would limit China's own leverage.
Well, North Korea is not necessarily good for China for a number of reasons. And I think one of the biggest things that we can threaten China with is this. If they don't, and we ended up living with nuclear North Korea, and North Korea can blackmail us, and let's say we say, okay, no more, we don't want to risk our own country being attacked by North Korea, so pull out the forces. What's going to be the natural course of what's going to happen is without our nuclear umbrella, South Korea is probably going to go nuclear. Then Japan will go nuclear. China and Japan have major rivalry. China does not want Japan to go nuclear. And as I mentioned earlier, if all of the South Korea and China and Japan goes nuclear, there's also Taiwan. So there's a whole nuclear proliferation in East Asia that's not good for China. China doesn't even want a missile defense in South Korea. That's not good for China. Secondly, North Korea does not do anything for China. It's because of North Korea, China, even on human rights front, China is China has been accused by United Nations, a Commission of Inquiry in Human Rights, a 400-page report, as the arbiter of a country that commits crime against humanity. China wants to be a respectable international stakeholder, become the right, be the superstar. How is it going to do that when you are abetting and helping this, a country that commits crime against humanity? It doesn't. There's a whole host of reasons that North Korea it's a pain for China. It's just that, as I mentioned earlier, because China's priority is still instability and avoiding instability and status quo and avoiding unification, that's pro-United States unified Korea, they have not fundamentally shifted its thinking. But I do think there's more debate that's going on in China internally. What's best? What's really in best interest of China?
Russia and China to any type of limited U.S. military action in North Korea?
That's a very good question. And I think if we just attack North Korea now, it's going to be a problem. I think there's a potential for, it's a debatable question whether China is really going to intervene. But if North Korea, let's say, conducts an atmospheric test, we need a provocation. So in a way, in kind of cynical way, we almost need North Korea to act very badly for us to follow up with that. Because they give us more of a reason than just like all of a sudden North Korea is reaching out to South Korea, they're going to Olympics and we attack North Korea. That doesn't make us look good, right? So it's really interesting in terms of what China is going to do because we were wrong once, right? Remember the Korean War? When MacArthur and Truman, they decided to send the US forces beyond the 38th parallel and go up the north, they concluded that China was not going to intervene. When MacArthur met with Trump, even like a week before China intervened, President asked MacArthur, Truman asked MacArthur, they met in some islands in the Pacific and said, what if Chinese intervene? And MacArthur said, absolutely not. And I was reading this, I was relooking the CIA assessment, which were dead wrong, that China was not going to do. Why would Mao do that, et cetera, et cetera. So Kim Il-sung invaded South Korea because he was convinced, he was able to convince Mao and Stalin that US was not going to intervene, right? Because we already left, we drew up the edges in the line, defense perimeter, South Korea was not included. We, United States, seem to be totally fine with the loss of China. Why would we go and protect South Korea? North Korea's made that wrong calculation. Kim Il-sung was wrong, and we were wrong when we made that calculation about China. So that's why there's a lot of concern now. We don't want to be wrong again because we do not want a conflict with China over North Korea. But China and North Korea relationship has changed over the years. So an argument is now being made that it's no longer that same China-North Korea relationship. It's no longer that blood alliance. Mao lost his own son during the Korean War, but it's not the case. Xi Jinping cannot stand Kim Jong-un. That's obvious. He has never invited Kim Jong-un in 6.5 years to come and visit. How many times Xi Jinping met with former President Park and now Moon Jae-in, but he has never met with Kim Jong-un. So there is no love lost there. So would China really now risk a war with the United States over North Korea? But I think it's something that we cannot conclusively say, but this is something that we are actively looking at, and this is a very, very important question.
What would the allegiance be for South Korea since they are the same race and share family ties in the north? Or would they be neither our political, economic, or military power? So if you could just speak to about the fact, how would the South interact with North? What would be their considerations?
The pan-national ethnic nationalism, it's very real. And this is why Kim Jong-un is playing his card very carefully. Remember when he's reaching out to making this overture to South Korea by sending the delegation to the Olympics, Kim Jong-un made a point. He just said it 2 days ago. Our nuclear weapons are not for South Korea. It's only for the United States, right? Already trying to sort of get South Korea to their side. And what would be a real smart move for Kim Jong-un is that if there has to be a retaliation or some sort of attack, North Korea might attack Japan. Not necessarily so, because that would and then it would make South Koreans, put them in a really awkward spot. And then he will appeal to this nationalism, we're one people. Now, Koreans are so proud of that, right? We're the most homogeneous country in the world, this pure bloodline. etc. So I think that is definitely in the mind of North Korea. It is a factor. You can play that. So I am somewhat concerned that that could be a factor in how things play out in terms of nationalistic sentiment. And, Koreans are they're proud people, and they're very into that whole nationalism. And there's a phrase in Korean called "우리 민족끼리." It's like ourselves, our people will take care of our thing. So this is what North Koreans are doing right now.
Got a few questions here about U.S. and North Korean military capabilities. Do we, the United States, have the ability to shoot down a nuclear rocket?
That's a very difficult question. So we're already talking about an intercept. We're talking about, first of all, intercept of just a missile. And even that's kind of very difficult. It's because it depends on, it's very technical. Like, it can be too high, it can be like too beginning to this. It's a very technical. I just spent some time with a missile analyst, and I think we are not conclusive on that. But right now, we do have, it could work. I mean, the last few tests did work, the one didn't work. So I think the short answer to your question is, we don't have a 100% guarantee that it will work.
Does North Korea have an extensive tunnel system to be used in case of a nuclear attack?
They have thousands of tunnels. That's the problem here. Even in an all-out war, what we are concerned about is we're not going to be able to take care of it all. That there is going to be something left over. We're not going to get rid of everything. We're not going to be able to get rid of all their nukes and missiles. There are also covert sites and oversights and covert sites. Like, there are sites that we don't know. In the intelligence community, we don't have a list of 100% of their facilities. What that means is, even if we attack, in total blanket attack, in all-out war, if we don't get rid of everything, then we won't. And they will attack, retaliate. There will be a retaliation. That is one of the factors. That's why it makes it so hard. Never mind all the catastrophic casualties, but even if you're willing to risk that, because of the extensive tunnel system, because we don't know where all the things are, this is a problem that we have to risk their retaliation.
What weapons manufacturing capability does North Korea have, particularly for such things as tanks, aircraft, rockets, and ships?
I mean, this is one of the largest military that has everything. I mean, in terms of their relative to their economic standing and how poor it is, it spends most amount of money and in equipment and for their all of that. But their conventional stuff like tanks, a lot of it is archaic because you can also train, you cannot run, you cannot practice because they don't have money, they're poor. That's why they already decided they're going to probably lose in a conventional war with even South Korea. And that's why they're focused on this nuclear aspect, because it's one thing they do have over South Korea. Because they have nuclear capability, then they win. Even if they lack on every other area, South Korea has more sophisticated everything in terms of equipment, and so North Koreans understand that. That's why they have to rely on nuclear, and chemical, and biological, and cyber, and all this asymmetric capability.
Very quickly, ma'am, does North Korea have the intellectual ability within their own citizens, or do they import it?
You mean for the?
They have the brain power, or
Yeah.
they imported the brain power.
No, I do think it's both. All how they made this kind of progress. I mean, I don't know if you read the New York Times report recently by David Sanger on how the intelligence community was consistently wrong and underestimated North Korea. It just came out last week. They did import it. A lot of people helped, right? Initially it was a lot from Russia and China. There were the nuclear scientists, engineers, and everybody from China and Russia helped, Soviet Union. And then they got a lot of help from Pakistan, A.Q. Khan, Pervez Musharraf, all of them admitted that was to be the case. So they do have help and assistance, but I do think after that they are developing themselves. And I think we, the United States, have continually underestimated that ability. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's kind of like, we always like to look down on North Korea because they act so strangely to say, oh, they can't do this, they can't do that. But they have over and over have shown that consistently that they can, and they always surprise us. So I think it's time to stop underestimating North Koreans, and they take that threat quite very seriously.
Have the recent defecting soldiers provided any useful information?
Defectors, you provide useful information. Usually most of it, at least at the elite level. I'm not sure what this last defector told South Koreans. I'm sure he was able to provide some military knowledge, but beyond that, I mean, you saw that he had like how many tapeworms, like dozens of tapeworms that were this long that came out of this guy's body. So they said volumes about the state of North Korea health condition was even in the military guys and the soldiers, they're supposed to be at least better off than the ordinary citizens. Just imagine the health situation of North Korea. So they always were able to tell us something. A lot of other information that we got about the elites and the state of mind, all of this came from those defectors, not only the soldiers, but like that ambassador who defected and the money guy who defected. So every time there's defection, we do learn a little bit more. And I spent some time, and it was part of my job for like 7-8 months, was to just debrief the defectors. So I spent a lot of time. Sometimes you have to take what they say with some grain of salt, because they're North Koreans, they're very smart. They eventually figure out that the more sexy the things that they say, there is some money, you take them out for kalbi and give them a little allowance. But if they say something that's like not useful, then there's no more meeting. So you do have to take some of them for with grain of salt. But it's true that with defectors, you do learn a lot. I would recommend a book by Barbara Demick called Nothing to Envy. It's a collection of defector stories. Because she was a journalist, it's very easy read. It's not hard at all, and it says you learn a lot about North Korean society.
First of all, could you comment on the Trump administration's handling of North Korea? And then, you've done this before, what would you recommend to our government? And if you don't mind, as an end, are there any good sources or media outlets that can provide credible information as we follow these events? If you could speak to that. I can bring that up.
I actually support Trump administration's North Korea policy broadly, in that I do think the maximum pressure is the way to go. I wish that maximum pressure was in place earlier. The strategic patience, and I understand what President Obama was trying to do there. It was good that he didn't want to at least go back to talks for the sake of talks, because the whole thing was like, as Bob Gates said, I don't want to buy the same horse 3 times, So that was good. But what didn't happen was, but 8 years went by, and while they were continuing with this, improving their capability. So I wish this kind of level of sanctions. I was always a proponent of serious sanctions, as I said, like hard sanctions, and then China to implement. For China to implement, you have to actually continue with secondary boycott, meaning you have to hit Chinese banks and entities that do illicit business with North Korea. So it does hurt, and I think that's what President Obama didn't want to do, is hurt the relationship with China, because China's relationship is so critical. But you have to pay price somewhere. So if you're serious about solving North Korean problem, you do have to hit Chinese, otherwise they're not going to do it. So that's the kind of situation. So I do broadly support it. I don't necessarily like completely destroying North Korea kind of rhetoric that came out of the United Nations. I just don't think, my button is bigger. It might be very satisfying. It's true, my button is bigger. Or saying completely destroy North Korea. It might be satisfying, but because North Koreans just have to play that. And then it says totally destroy North Korea. And then, the public, it gets public riled up, and people, they're already trying to paint us as the evil guys who are trying to attack North Korea, and we're feeding them out. So minus the rhetoric, I broadly support the policy of maximum pressure. In terms of what we need to do, it's very, very tough. I share the concern of proliferation and everything else. So what we're doing is looking into what robust containment and deterrence policy would be like, which means it has to be a lot more than what we're doing right now. Maybe interdiction of every single thing that comes out of North Korea. It will be very harsh policy, minus actually attacking North Korea. I'm just, not sold on attacking North Korea right now, just because I don't know how we can manage the consequences of that. Just as that, we don't know what everything is, what's the exact plan. So I need to be briefed more in detail of these plans before I can endorse a military attack against North Korea.
Concludes today's program. Let's give a very warm thank you.
Do whatever you can and try to diplomatically and financially squeeze the regime. So it will have to choose basically between survival and keeping nuclear weapons. That's why we have maximum sanctions in place. And we talked a little bit about, a lot of people think sanctions have been in place for a very long time. They have, but not serious sanctions. Serious sanctions have only been in place on North Korea since about February, March of last year. But sanctions have never been really implemented because China, which I'll get to, never really implemented sanctions. China is finally doing more just in recent months, and we can talk about why, and because Mr. Trump is really squeezing China very, very hard on this. So China is finally doing more, but that's only been a few months. And if you look at the case of Iran, it took 3 years of very serious sanctions for Iran to come to the negotiating table. So it takes some time for that to play out. That's where the Trump administration is in terms of trying to pressure through sanctions. So where is China on this? Problem with China is that it's not that China wants nuclear North Korea, but China's priority has always been trying to avoid instability of the Korean Peninsula. China's priority has been trying to still keep North Korea as a buffer state. To keep unified Korea, does not want unified Korea. That's pro-United States, right? Why would China want unified Korea that's potentially pro-United States and has all these US forces in there? Like they don't want that. They want a buffer. They don't want instability. So what South Koreans have been doing under the previous administration, Park Geun-hye, is when they've been trying to work with China to make China's interests, say, look, your interest is not served by this. Your interest will be better served by doing something about North Korea. Because China, right now, North Korea's 90% of North Korea's trade is with China. China supplies everything to North Korea: fuel, food, everything, consumer goods. So if China really cut everything off, North Korea will be in trouble. So that's why everybody's getting to China. But again, China does not see it's in its interest to really rein in North Korea to the point that North Korea will collapse. That's why South Koreans have been trying to make that argument. Look, China is South Korea's #1 trading partner, not the United States. China and South Korea trade volume is double that of South Korea, United States, South Korea, Japan combined. Hey, China, we already close. We already have this economic relationship. And all the stuff that you don't like THAAD, missile defense, we're there, you don't want that, that's because of North Korea. If you cannot get a handle on it, maybe there is a proliferation in Northeast Asia. South Korea might have to go nuclear. Japan might have to go nuclear. Potentially Taiwan will follow, because Taiwan does not want to be the only country left. Is this a great picture for you, China? But so far, China has not philosophically completely shifted its thinking. That's why it's continuing, the administration is continually pressing on China to do more. So that is the policy. Diplomatically isolate North Korea, financially isolate North Korea to the point where North Koreans will have to come back. But for that to really work, China has to do its part. But as I said, I'm sort of also skeptical whether China will get there. And I was just talking to the White House official who said, they're willing to then play really hardball with China if China is not going to get there. So we'll see what's going to happen. But I do think we are at a critical point here. We're at a very critical point. Because North Korea is done with about 90 to 95% of they've completed there. They're very few steps away. We talked about, they really reached their the new milestone when they tested their first intercontinental ballistic missile in July, 4th of July this year. They tested 2, and then they just recently tested 1. The last one really showed the range they could hit anywhere in the United States. The question about their technical capability, there's some question about miniaturization, but I think it's pretty much is a consensus that North Korea have militarized. What that means is, as you were talking about, there may be really one technical hurdle away, which is re-entry capability, having a successful re-entry capability. So they're going there. Kim Jong-un is not stopping. Despite this recent thaw, I think he's going to continue. He will have to continue and show that he has this re-entry capability, which will probably come maybe spring of this year. And then the U.S.